Inshallah, this event, it's like, okay, it's recording. That's just letting everyone know. Alhamdulillah, studying about eyes these past 3 years has helped me change my perception and how I see the world. Inshallah, this event can help us all renew our perspectives on life as well. Okay, looks like we got quite the crowd, alhamdulillah. I would like to officially welcome you all to the third part of the Guidance to Greatness series, Seeking Solace, which will be exploring mental health and Islamic psychology. While we wait for more people to join, I'll get the UNSW students here to fill out the online ARC form, please. The link should be in the chat. And if you have trouble accessing or anything, please let me know. I'll give everyone like 2 minutes to do that. Okay, so a rough agenda for the night. We'll be having 2 talks, one titled Understanding Myself and My Mental Health, and the other being Finding Contentment in Hardship. Inshallah, after the 2 talks, we'll end things off with a fun Kahoot. The Kahoot itself is based on random general knowledge. And there is a prize for the winner, by the way, so stay tuned till the end. Co-hosting with me tonight is Sister Nashin. I'll pass it over to her.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Nashin, and a bit about me is that I'm a first year studying engineering. So now while we do wait for more people to join, I'll just go through some Zoom housekeeping rules. So inshallah, this event can run smoothly. Firstly, if you could all please have your microphones on mute to reduce the background noise. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to use the chat box below.
Okay, so let's get started with our first speaker for the night, Brother Ziyad. Brother Ziyad is a mental health educator who co-founded EducAid. EducAid is an organization that focuses on educating and actually equipping communities with mental health knowledge. Mental health is something that is spoken about now more than it ever was before. So what's Islam's take on it? Tonight, Brother Ziyad will be presenting the topic, Understanding Myself and My Mental Health. Throughout the talk, please feel free to ask questions in the chat box. If you're uncomfortable asking in the main chat, feel free to directly message me or Brother Ziyad. I'll let Brother Ziyad take the screen, inshallah. Is Brother Ziyad here?
Yep, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Just a second, I'm just uploading my presentation.
Yep, no
so
worries.
If you can, just let me know, inshallah, that you can see it, and then we can get started. So, all right. I think everyone is, yeah, I've just put my video on now. So I'll just do a quick intro, inshallah, and then jump into the presentation. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, everyone is doing well. My name is Ziyad. Inshallah, I'll be with you guys for the next 40 minutes or so. I guess navigating an important conversation around mental health, I guess understanding our mental health collectively. And then inshallah, I guess if there's opportunities, perhaps we can have a discussion / Q&A. I guess I wanted to start off with, just acknowledging, that this is a very unique time that we find ourselves in currently. And I think more now than ever, the conversation around mental health has definitely been to the forefront, has been brought to the forefront, considering the situation, the uncertainty, the anxieties that, we're facing as a collective. So inshallah, the aim of the session today is to give us an introduction to, how do we better understand our mental health. I acknowledge that the university time now for all of you is a unique experience, but also one that's filled with a lot of vulnerabilities. So hopefully setting the foundations today is going to, I guess, be empowering for yourself and be empowering for your I was going to say for your colleagues, but for your fellow brothers and sisters, inshallah. So I'm going to share my screen. If I could just get a heads up, screen one, that you guys can see it. How's that?
Yeah, looking good.
Yep, so it's just the first slide. Yep, all good. All right, khair, inshallah. So yeah, so just I guess for me, all right, here we go. So just starting off with an acknowledgement of country as well. Would like to do an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're all zooming in from today, and pay our respect to the elders past and present. I guess this has been, the acknowledgement of country has been something I've recently incorporated into many of my talks. And I guess one reflection that I did want to share today was so in my current role with Headspace, so I work with Headspace as an education consultant currently. And I guess one of the big things in this space is a program that I've been co-designing or being part of the co-design team with Greg Inglis. Not sure if you guys know GI. He's an ex-rugby league player. And I guess one thing I valued, like as a Muslim, as someone that comes from a cultural background, other than the typical Anglo living in Australia, was the vast, I guess, the richness that indigenous cultures have in offering many learnings to us as Muslims. So there was one particular experience that Greg Inglis was sharing with the youth in the session. He was saying that part of Aboriginal culture is the respect and the reverence that they have for their elders. And on one particular occasion, when he was feeling extremely stressed and vulnerable, one thing he did was he actually picked up the phone and spoke to his grandmother, and he cried over the phone as a way of, I guess, decreasing his stress levels, but also acknowledging the importance that the family structure plays within Aboriginal culture. And in extension to this, we can learn a lot from Aboriginal culture. Their framework when it comes to mental health and well-being. We know that unfortunately Indigenous communities are at the forefront of suicide statistics, which aren't sober statistics when it comes to suicide and mental illness, etc., relative to the general population. And what they've done is they've set up their own framework around understanding mental health and well-being and incorporating spirituality when they speak about mental health and well-being. So I feel like there's a lot we can learn and bounce off as this conversation around mental health grows amongst Muslim communities. So yeah, so just a brief introduction. I was introduced as one of the co-founders of Educate. So just a bit about me. I guess I feel very connected to everyone here. I spent 6 years at Sydney Uni, and I served, alhamdulillah, on the Sydney Uni Muslim Student Association for around 4 years, alhamdulillah, from 2011, 12, 13, 14, yeah, for 4 years. And the MSA scene and it's a very special place for me personally. So I guess from there, alhamdulillah, I finished my studies. As a high school teacher, so I'm a trained high school teacher. So that's my involvement in terms of uni and my professional background. I kind of transitioned out of my teaching role momentarily as I co-founded Educate, which is an organization / non-for-profit company where we're, I guess, investing a lot of time in educating, mind the pun, multicultural communities and culturally and linguistically diverse communities when it comes to mental health literacy. So working in school, community, and workplaces to equip them with the skills to be able to understand their mental health better, but also to be able to respond when it comes to people around them that might be presenting with mental illness or mental distress of that sort. So I guess our philosophy rests on challenging the stigma educating, and also empowering. And I guess I might mention here that, you know, being part of the Muslim community, even though we don't focus solely on the Muslim community, but being part and parcel of the Muslim community, alhamdulillah, we've been snapped up by a whole range of different organizations and mosques and masajid to run programs and trainings. So we've, over the last 2 years, we've partnered with, mosques and even peak bodies. So we've worked closely with ANIC and trained imams in mental health first aid and also suicide intervention or suicide prevention workshops. And that was like extremely eye-opening, because it was, we often hear, there's a stigma, not enough's being done, etc. So playing that role in the space of, working closely with different parts of the Muslim community has been extremely rewarding and eye-opening. So yeah, it's inshallah something that we can all continue to play a role in furthering the conversation, but more specifically within the university scene. So why the university scene? I'm going to expand on that in a second, but I guess the session today, I'm going to present it in 3 main parts. So the first one, I'm going to kind of introduce what we're talking about by referencing a very famous social/psychology experiment that you might have heard of. The second part is the bulk, where we're going to be talking about understanding mental health, so laying some important foundational definitions, and then linking that back to some Islamic teachings where we can seek some prophetic guidance, some prophetic wisdoms. And then the third part, I'll be wrapping up the conversation, inshallah, with regards to some practicality around this, around speaking about mental health, not just for ourselves, but also for the community, the wider community. So I guess drawing your attention, if we were in person, I love face-to-face trainings. I guess it's the teacher in me coming out. Yeah, I would have much preferred not speaking to my walls and my post-it notes and knowing that my 2 toddlers are watching a movie in the background, and would have rather, I guess, connected. But alhamdulillah, it is what it is. We have an opportunity, through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's tawfiq to, I guess, gather together virtually on a Sunday night and discuss this. But anyways, if we were in person, and it was pre-COVID, and I've done this activity a fair few times, especially with students in my class, is to, I guess, imitate or reestablish, redo this marshmallow experiment, remodel the experiment. So it was 1972. This is known as the Stamford marshmallow experiment. I was told that this experiment went viral through TikTok. Someone's made like a video that's gone viral. But it was a groundbreaking discovery, which hits home in a creative way, an important concept that we can draw a lot of inspiration from. So the study involved the following. You had Walter Mischel, the psychologist, professor at Stanford Uni. He placed children in a room, sitting down on a table with a camera rolling, and would place a marshmallow in front of them and giving them 2 options. He said, you can either eat the marshmallow straight away, okay, or you can wait a certain amount of time and without eating the marshmallow. So you have 2 options. You can either eat it straight away or wait 20 minutes. Let's say it was 20 minutes for a second marshmallow if you don't eat the first one. Okay. So you had a range of different responses from these children. So you had children, obviously big decisions for anyone here that's interacted with toddlers. They take sugary sweets very serious. And they're very emotional creatures, mashallah, with amazing creatures. Just let's leave it at that. Being stuck with 2 toddlers in lockdown has been very fun, alhamdulillah. The second, there was other images which came out of the children and what happened. This kid, I believe he licked his marshmallow, couldn't hold himself. And then you had this child, she was adamant on waiting it out. I guess the interesting thing is that the experiment didn't just end here. The experiment carried on for another, I think it was about 15 or 20 years. And what the researcher did, he followed these young children as they grew up and monitored the types of decisions that they were making. Okay, obviously wasn't spying on them, but he'd follow them, I guess, and quiz them at certain points. And he found a correlation between the children that were able to withhold themselves from that initial desire of eating the marshmallow and the children that indulged in it straight away. He found that the correlation was those that waited, were able to withhold themselves, generally made better decisions in their life across their lifespan. Those that didn't wait and ate their marshmallow straight away, and this is not a judgment, please don't self-diagnose. The children that did engage in the marshmallow straight away and ate it, they generally made more rushed decisions that weren't always in their best interest. Okay, and the concept of delayed gratification was born. So this marshmallow experiment, the big thing to come out of it was this term delayed gratification. It was the idea that there's reward, or there's something special about not indulging and engaging and acting on one's instinctual desires for a greater reward. And I guess for me, reflecting on this, and why am I mentioning this? I guess for two reasons: the fascination around human behavior and psychology and mental health, etc., is something that we absolutely need to appreciate. But secondly, I guess looking at this through a spiritual lens and from a religious standpoint, is that the marshmallow experiment, it models exactly a Muslim's life. This idea that you're going to be tested with your money, you're going to be tested with your desires, you're going to be tested with lockdowns and things that are out of your control. And if you're able to withhold your desire and withhold temptations and making rash decisions, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises you and us and everyone a bigger reward, inshallah, in the hereafter. So I guess starting off with this is just to really recalibrate and to appreciate I guess the test, right, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has presented us with by placing us on this earth. So that's the first part, I guess, in terms of that. And I'd highly encourage, just for fun, I'm not sure, at a shorter meeting or a volunteers meeting, maybe you can do this for people that aren't here today. But it really hits home, or if you tutor or you want to do this with your siblings or your extended relatives, it's definitely something rewarding and a very useful lesson, I guess, can be sought from the conversation or from this experiment. I guess the second thing I wanted to touch on was this idea of understanding our mental health. What the hell is this word mental health? Unfortunately, what I've seen being in the space, and mind you, I'm not a professional, I'm not a clinician, I'm a mental health educator. Alhamdulillah, I forgot to mention in the start that I'm also studying my Masters of Counseling. And last year I did a bit of study in youth mental health. I guess coming from a school space and working very closely with youth, I'm extremely passionate about youth mental health. So I guess why do we need to be speaking about mental health, and why the focus? I guess the first thing is to kind of define what do we mean by mental health. When we think of this when we think of the word health, this can mean many things. Unfortunately, because of the way we've been conditioned in society, we often think about health as being health in the physical sense only. But as we know, holistically, when we look at health, it involves more than just the physical dimension. There's the physical dimension, the emotional, mental, social, spiritual dimensions. And I guess, for us, we know that overall well-being, overall health, holistic health incorporates these, and it's a fine balance between these different dimensions. So when we, I guess, to zoom in, just to kind of actually mention that spiritual health plays a massive part in the life of a Muslim. And as I alluded to in the start, when we talk about the Aboriginal, Indigenous communities, I guess it also plays an extremely important role when it comes to their overall well-being. Like I said, they've redefined mental health to suit their community, to incorporate this dimension of spirituality. And we even know now in mainstream psychology, mainstream conversations around mental health, the big thing is this whole thing around mindfulness. How do we incorporate mindfulness techniques and meditations, etc., because feeding and nourishing the spiritual dimension of our health has grown to become really, really important. So I guess the conversation today is around the mental health, dimension, which I'm just going to zoom in a little bit just to kind of hit home a few key points. So I usually spend a lot of time on this mental health continuum, and I'd usually accompany this with an activity if we were in person, but I guess difficult because of the limitations. So the mental health continuum is one of the most powerful tools to demonstrate what we mean by mental health. Often, when we speak about mental health versus physical health, we often see them in two different lights. And I've done this was an activity I developed myself. So, if you could just imagine, I'm going to narrate what would happen in a typical webinar, a typical workshop or training that we deliver, is I actually get people to brainstorm. So 2 columns, physical health, mental health. I say, okay, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the words physical health? Okay. Perhaps you guys can write it in the box, in the chat box. Feel free. When you think about physical health, what do you think about? And write it down. And I'll perhaps, here we go, rolling in. Farhan Khan. You think about Farhan Khan, mashallah. Yeah, exercising. We think about, other things. Diet, perhaps. Sleep. Yep, excellent. Really good. Physical health, exercising, strength, diet, etc., which is excellent. All good. So I guess, if you can see, you can see my mouse, right? If you can see everything that you've mentioned is great. I guess now to the flip side, and this is meant to be an impulse activity, when society thinks about the words mental health, what do they generally think about? Write that down in the box quickly. Mental health. Excellent. Good. Depression, yep. Weakness, anxiety, absolutely. Overthinking, very good. Delusion. Yep, keep them coming. State of our subconscious, yep. Sick. Excellent. Self-esteem issues, yeah, absolutely. Very good. Okay. Well, you guys rolled them in, all right. It's interesting, right? If I told you now, if I can just get you guys to imagine that these are in 2 columns side by side, physical health, mental health, how would you describe both lists? What would you say about the physical health list and what would you say about the mental health list? If someone wants to kind of open their mic, I'm happy to take answers. Okay, it took me longer to think about physical health, but what were the types of words that we used when we described physical and mental health? Yeah, there was a stigma. Excellent. Yep, Aisha, thank you. Positive connotations to physical health, not mental health. And I guess that's the answer I was looking for. And that is, when we think about physical health, we think about the more positive things. We use positive words. Even if we use, illness, it's not seen as a negative thing, right? But when we think about mental health, and focus with me here, right? When we think about mental health, in hindsight, we're not thinking about mental health. We're thinking about mental illness. Yeah, we're not thinking about mental health. We're thinking about mental illness. And that's the I guess the crux of when we talk about mental health literacy. It's shifting people away, and I guess establishing an important foundation that when we speak about mental health, it's more than just the absence of illness. Okay, so what I mean by this, another way is using the mental health continuum. When we think about physical health, we think about our health that moves up and down. We do things to get healthy in the green zone. I was going to say we catch a virus, but God forbid we catch a virus, especially now. It's a bit awkward to say the word virus. But anyways, imagine, someone went to Macca's and copped gastro. Again, God forbid, but say it does happen. Goes to the red zone. We have things to get out of the red zone when it comes to our physical health. We go see a doctor, see a specialist, we rest, we sleep, etc. Right? So our physical health moves up and down on this continuum. But the question is, because of the stigma, it's not a question, but a point, because of the way we think about mental health, the stigma means that when we think about mental illness, when we think about those words that were mentioned, depression, anxiety, crazy, we automatically think that the person stays stuck in that red zone, that there's no way out. So part of the stigma around mental health, mental illness, is this idea that the person is stagnant, is fixated in the illness zone and will never escape. Okay? Whereas what I'm coming to tell you today is that just like physical health, our mental health moves up and down on this continuum. And just like you'd go and seek professional help from a doctor, You'd also go and seek professional help from a therapist. You know, you go to your support networks and seek that mental health and emotional support that you might need when it comes to illness. And with every illness, you know, even the more harder mental illnesses like schizophrenia, psychotic illnesses, eating disorders, there's all evidence-based treatments associated with each of those that we speak about. Okay, so I guess thinking about our mental health, and this is very important for ourselves, right? Because when we think about a continuum, that our health lies on a continuum, it's our first step into understanding not just more about ourselves, but also the support and the hope that we can give to people that are going through difficult times, right? That person that might actually have symptoms of clinical depression, not just sadness, but clinical depression, that we understand that there's hope, so we're better able to confidently support and intervene and help them move across the continuum, right? So when we think about the mental health continuum, our physical health continuum, we think about it that it moves up and down. And the other example I often give, even when there's non-Muslims, is the example of spiritual health. Our spiritual health is on this continuum as well. It moves up and down. In Ramadan, in periods of high, sorry, it's my phone. In periods of high ibadah or high worship, high periods of worship, Ramadan, Dhul Hijjah, etc., we find that our spirituality, our iman is flying through the roof, right? Like in the green zone. It's very, very healthy. Comes the end of Ramadan, comes the 6 days of Shawwal, you know, we're back down to, you know, dwindling in the orange to red zone. And we have to do things to keep our iman in check, our spiritual health in check, right? And all these different dimensions of health are all interconnected. You know, our spiritual health, our spirituality helps us, you know, with our emotional and mental health, which is also linked to our physical health. So these aren't in isolation. I guess the point of mentioning them here separately is to kind of really hit home the idea that when we speak about our mental health, we need to bring balance to the conversation, that it's more than just the absence of illness, or it's more than mental illness. Okay. In fact, the definition of mental health as per the World Health Organization, if you want to take a note of this, take a screenshot, you know, it's important that we spread the word beyond today. I'd love to hear your reflections. I don't know if there's feedback forms, etc. at the end, just to see if how much of a paradigm shift there was. Because when we look at the definition of mental health, this is exactly what it is, right? Mental health, as per the World Health Organization, is a state of well-being in which the individual, 4 things. The first one is realizes his or her own abilities. Okay, so there's self-awareness, can cope with the normal stresses of life. So what I love about the definition is it validates the idea that stress is part and parcel of life. You know, because we live in such a visual world, often, you know, we perceive, you know, people's lives on the screen as being so perfectionistic or perfect that it's impossible for them to go through any difficulty or any stress. So the idea of validating that life comes with stress is really important to the definition of mental health, that you're able to cope with those stresses. The third thing is can work productively and fruitfully. And the 4th definition is able to make a contribution to their community. So when we talk about mental health, as through the definition here, it's more than just an internal state. It's also the way you interact with your external environment. Sorry, my daughter's crying and it's a little bit loud. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, just give me a sec. I'm just gonna ask if I can plug her with a dummy. That thing is miraculous. Yeah, excuse that one. Yeah, so where we're so in terms of mental health and the definition, I guess you know, shifting away from seeing mental health and mental illness synonymously, they are separate. What is mental health? I guess foundationally this is what it is. And when we go through, when we deliver trainings and courses, whether it's high school age students or young adults, we always kind of start off the conversation at this to kind of really set an important foundation. So I guess shifting our, you know, I guess complementing this with looking at prophetic inspiration, more specifically at the idea that life is full of stress, right? Life presents stresses to us. We know that in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Mulk, He says, تبارك الذي بيده بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. Right? This very idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created life and death to test those who are best amongst us. We've heard this ayah so many times, and it validates this idea that, you know, when we talk about life as a test, we you know, that comes in the form of stress and the different stressors that might fill our buckets, our stress buckets. We also know that, you know, when we look at mental health, subhanallah, this was something that Dr. Asim Yusuf, one of the leading psychiatrists / scholars from the UK, he was mentioning that when you look at the year of sorrow, when the Prophet Muhammad sallam, when his wife Khadija radiallahu anha and his uncle Abu Talib, his two biggest supporters whilst he was being persecuted in Mecca, they passed away. And it was known as the year of sorrow. And if you actually think about this, the year of sorrow means sorrow is an emotion, right? So the year of sorrow, the year of an emotion. Look at how Islam validates the idea that we need to be looking at after our emotional health. You know, so much so that in Sirah, it's referred to, it's named after an emotion. You know, we know the hadith, strange are the affairs of a believer. So, sorry. And I'll read it in Arabic because it's beautiful. You know, in a hadith narrated in Sahih Muslim, the hadith goes like this: عجبا لأمر المؤمن إن أمر كله خير وليس ذلك لأحد إلا للمؤمن إن أصابته سراء شكر فكان خيرا له وإن أصابته ضراء صبر فكان خيرا له. Beautiful hadith. That strange is the affair of the believer, because there's good in every situation. You know, when this is not the case for anyone except for the believer. He thanks God. You know, if there was a situation where it was a good situation, he thanks God and he's thankful for it. He thanks God and it's good for him in thanking God. It shows gratitude, which is another buzzword in the mental health world. You know, gratitude journaling, etc. But subhanAllah, I guess appreciating that this is already something that we can leverage off in our deen, you know, can give us extra impetus in the way we look after our mental health. So that's the hadith, right? Strange affair of the believer. When good things happen, he thanks God and that's good for him. And if something bad happens to him, he gets into trouble, etc., then he's enduring it patiently and he also gets rewarded for that. SubhanAllah. So when we think about you know, these reference points from our deen, we think about the definition I just gave before around mental health, this idea of coping with stress of life, you can see the interrelationship between the two, right? The psycho-spiritual health or the dimension of our health as Muslims is so important. And I guess seeking that prophetic inspiration is also crucial. So I guess another, I'll redesign this slide. So here we go. Another quote from Ibn al-Qayyim, which is beautiful, which kind of really hits home this idea of, you know, life being a time of stress, etc. His wisdom, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, determined that happiness, pleasure, and comfort are not reached except by the bridge of difficulty and fatigue. And they are not accessed except through the gates of hardship, patience, and enduring difficulties. So this is a quote, you know, validating yet, you know, the importance of looking at life as a test and full of stress, but, you know, there's also a reward at the end of that. So when we look at mental health stigma and breaking the stigma, as I mentioned before, you know, when we look at physical illness versus mental illness, there's a stark contrast with regards to the way we respond to them. And, you know, another activity that I often do is I give a scenario where I say, you know, imagine that you're in a year 8 classroom. Someone comes after 2 weeks being absent. They come with a plaster around their hand. You know, the first response usually is people want to sign it, are curious, want to know what's happening, etc., etc. And yeah, so we pause there and we say, in a second scenario, if you had that same classmate that was absent for 2 weeks, no one knew where they were, and they come and say, look, I've been absent for 2 weeks. I was severely depressed to the point where I was hospitalized because of suicidal thoughts that I was having. you know, how would the classmates, how would a year 8 class, or, you know, as a matter of fact, you know, university students respond to somebody in their social circle that's going through that? I guess, yeah, whilst, you know, one's hidden, one's not, it's very obvious that there's a lot more hesitation and I guess unknowns with regards to how to action or what to do in that situation. And unfortunately, that's perpetuated by stigma in the community, stigma on a so stigma's on 3 levels: on a institutional level, on a community level, and also on a self level. And I guess part of the conversations in doing what we do, what we're having right now, is to break that stigma, to kind of embrace the conversation more widely. And this is all coming to a head because I'm going to speak about why this is relevant to you and to me as a young adult. I'm still in the young adult zone, and to this phase of, I guess, early adolescence. Okay, I'm going to get to that in a second. So just another definition. I don't want to bore you too much with mental health definitions, but we spoke what mental health was. So what is the definition of mental illness? In, you know, using this as a yardstick, when someone's not doing well and potentially needs help, it's often when there's a major change in thoughts, feelings, and behavior, which causes disruption to day-to-day functioning and doesn't go away as quickly as it should. Okay, this is separate. A mental illness is not the same as a negative emotion. It's more than just feeling sad. Is more than just feeling anxious. Okay, because these are all things that we all experience. A mental illness is outside the normal range. Okay, and these 3 things we cover in the mental health first aid course and the trainings that we generally run for individuals. Just to kind of, as a first responder, what do you do, and how do you measure whether someone is actually just sad or someone's out of the normal zone? Okay, so, you know, through readings, you know, this was an interesting quote that I came across. So mental illnesses are the chronic diseases of the young. So when we look at what is affecting young people the most around the world, it's not diabetes or any physical ailments. In fact, the biggest burden of disease on young people is mental illness. It's the thing that's impacting young people the most. Okay. And I'm not saying this to kind of create more anxiety or, I guess, to create a state of panic. This is the reality. So how do we embrace it? I'm trying to, I guess, open up a conversation that is strength-based in nature, where we're turning a concern into action. And part of that action is, I guess, conversing and accepting the fact that, you know, we need to better navigate and I guess dedicate resources to the conversation around mental health and mental illness. Okay, because statistics, you know, when we talk about, you know, 1 in 4 young people or 1 in 7 young people, statistics vary, will experience a diagnosable mental illness in a 12-month period. 1 in 4. Like, that's, I can guarantee, like, we've all come across somebody, if not our own selves, who've experienced a mental illness. That mental illnesses, like 75% of people that will experience their first mental illness, it will happen before the age of 25. 50% of people experience a mental illness, an episode of a mental illness. 50% of those people, it will occur before the age of 18. Okay, let these, I guess, sink in. And it's more than just numbers, right? But this is kind of really trying to create the urgency around the conversation that we need to kind of, you know, our MSAs, our young Muslims on campus are definitely not immune from these statistics. And we know that for a fact. Okay. And just as we navigate through the next few slides, please, if at any point you feel distressed or you need to converse or you need to debrief with someone, please, I'm happy, I didn't include it, but I'm happy to send through like contact numbers of mental health services that you can access. But yeah, please look after yourself as we navigate the conversation from this point onwards. It's very, very important that we're safe emotionally, not just physically, but also emotionally and psychologically as we go through today's conversation. And I definitely understand that, you know, our mental health has been impacted because of what's going on around us. So yeah, just a small disclaimer there. So why is, oh man, I was only meant to display one, the animation didn't work, but it's all right. So I want you to pay attention to the first, I guess, diagram, the animation there. So prior to the 1950s, the way society worked was that, you know, if I was to categorize life stages, so there was childhood, adolescence, adulthood. Okay, so let's say 0 to 12 was childhood, 0 to 12, and then say 12 to 19 or 12 to 18, and then 18 plus, right? So a young person would grow up, go to school, transition into high school, and then most cases, or a lot of cases, they wouldn't even finish high school. They'll go straight to work, start a family, and there you have it. You know, that's it. They live the rest of their life working, bringing up a family, etc. That's how society generally worked prior to the 1950s. Okay, what happened with the emergence of, I guess, the Industrial Revolution and, you know, the way society worked changed, etc., which led to the following, right? And we can relate to this now. Okay, there's this addition of a new life stage, and, you know, I came across some phenomenal articles talking about this, and just kind of relating it back to my upbringing and, you know, the upbringing of a lot of my friends, for example, and family, when it came to a young Muslim navigating through life stages. It was very fascinating. So hear me out, right? So after the 1950s, life changed. So what changed about it specifically? You had someone that would go through childhood, 0 to 12, and then go through their teenage years, 12 to 18 or 12 to 17. And then there's this period here called early adolescence or emerging adulthood, which is in red. Okay. So this was a new life stage that was introduced, and that was from the ages of 18 to 29. So if I could just, you know, this is exactly where you are all at being at uni, right? You're in this early adolescent stage here. Okay. It's distinct. It's a distinct stage here for the following reasons. You know, you've gone through puberty, you've reached sexual maturity, you're not in school, and you've experienced there's diverse educational achievements. You're not minors under the law, so you're independent and you have that, you know, that flexibility, that power to make decisions for yourself. And it's a period of heightened instability. You know, things such as frequent job changes, relationship changes. And there's also a high level of disengagement when it comes to treatment in this age group. Okay. So this is 18 to 29. So this is almost like a delay. This is a period of instability where there's so much happening before someone gets into adulthood at, say, like their late 20s, early 30s, where they start a family, have settled down with regards to the job that they want to embark on, right? And this age period here has been identified as a high, so the way emerging adulthood is experienced in high income countries is that it's a period of instability because of the fact that a young person aged 18 to 29 is going through identity explorations. It's a period of instability. We spoke about that before. It's a period of self-focus where you have that ability to just focus on you and what you want to do with yourself, you know, nurture your spirituality, you know, you're feeling in between as well. There's feelings of in-betweenness. You're still developing. Your brain doesn't fully develop, as we know, until you're late, you know, some say until your late 20s. So the way you see the world is constantly changing, but more so during this period. And it's also the period of possibilities and optimism. Okay. So I think why am I mentioning this? Why am I mentioning this here? Because, you know, there's a lot of conversations within our community, right, that speak about, you know, should a young person, and please, I'm not trying to take a stance here, but this is a conversation I often challenge, right? Should a young person get married, you know, straight after high school to control their urges? You know, these are conversations that affect us, right? You know, conversations around career progression and career, you know, career changes and changes in university courses and how the implications that they have. You know, this is all during this stage of instability. So just validating that it is what it is. I think there's a lot to build up on in terms of how we can support each other get through this stage. You know, for me, the MSA plays a huge role. Like I said, I spent 4 years on the MSA. I was 2 years as the SWMSA president. So I'm in enemy territory here. UNSW was our rivals, no jokes. We did a lot together, by the way, so it was pretty good. But for me, the MSA is a massive protective factor. The Muslim community on campus is a huge protective factor in providing connections, social connections, providing that spiritual nourishment, the opportunity for people to contribute and volunteer, etc., is massive. And we need to be boosting these spaces. When we talk about mental health, it's not just about speaking about therapy. It's also speaking about these protective factors within the community that we need to be strengthening, because all of this helps protect our mental health and well-being. Okay? I hope that message really, really got sent home, because yeah, I could speak about it and expand on this for a lot more, but I guess I'll leave it at that for now, because we are running out of time. All right, should I go through this? Yeah, this is an infographic I came up with just to hit home what we mean when we say this period is a period of instability, but also it's a period where there's disengagement in therapy, right? For people that do need help. Okay, so if men, that analogy, I don't know if you guys have heard that analogy. If the world was a village of 100 people, have you seen the video? I'm pretty sure you have. If the world was 100 people, then 10 people would be from this continent. 12 people will be this color. 3 people will control the whole world's wealth, etc., etc. So I came up with my own version of this 100 people analogy, right? And hear me out, because it really hits a strong point, especially for young men, for those young men amongst us today. It hits home a very important point, that if men aged 16 to 24 years old are represented as 100 people, okay, out of these 100 people, 23 of them, 23 men, will have a diagnosable mental illness in a 12-month period. 23. And out of the 23, only 3 men will access a mental health service and seek professional help. That's really alarming. Really alarming when we're talking about breaking down those barriers. So much can be done. This doesn't rest on the shoulders of mental health professionals. This is a conversation that we all need to be embracing. Clinicians, non-clinicians, educators, students, we all need to be embracing this conversation, that mental health and looking after, the well-being of us collectively rests on our shoulders as a collective. Another, again, trigger warning here, another, I guess, staggering statistic is that the biggest cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds, so this isn't just 2016, it should read 2019, is suicide. The biggest cause of death, the leading cause of death, is suicide. So just let that sink in, right? And we know suicide is preventable. But again, not from like a theological perspective. We're talking more about what we can do about it in terms of, the actions that can be taken in breaking down stigmas, in educating. And, one of the things we also offer is the ASSIST course, which is the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. Is how do you actually intervene in somebody that's suicidal? And this is a conversation, again, unfortunately not had enough, especially within the Muslim community. When we spoke to imams, when we trained up imams, in a 4.5-hour workshop, just the paradigm shift that was experienced amongst, leaders of our community was huge, let alone, people at university. University students should all be equipped with these skills. And I mean this honestly, because of what I just spoke about before, that period of instability and the vulnerabilities that are there. Okay, so I guess that's the second part of the conversation, understanding our mental health, a few statistics, and I'm going to end here with helping those around us. So I'm not sure. I hope I'm not being too pushy with time, but this is a quote I came across recently on Instagram. So we are not all in the same boat. We are in the same storm. This was it hit home because of the whole COVID situation too. Some of us have yachts, some have canoes, and some are drowning. Just be kind and help whoever you can. Okay, so we're all facing storms of different kinds, and we all have different capabilities in terms of how we cope to stress, how we cope to trials and tribulations. I guess underlying that is, I guess, being kind, but also knowing how to be kind, how to help. And the big thing is, especially within a faith community, it's more than just having sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll just read the messages. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, some have sorry, what was I saying? Helping those around. Yeah, some have different coping mechanisms, I guess. Oh yeah, faith communities, it's not just about having good intentions and being sincere when you're helping or giving dawah to someone. It's also having the right skills. And that's a big thing I feel like we're lacking. And I know I experienced that in my early years, my younger years, volunteering for organizations and thinking that I can just put on my Superman cape of, giving people dawah and saving people from whatever troubles they're going through. But it's important. Sometimes just having sincerity and good intentions can potentially do more damage if we don't have that holistic skill set coupled with our good intentions. And we look at this, we can seek so much inspiration from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the way he dealt with people. And I'm going to wrap up on this in a second. So how do we help? What are those skill sets that I'm talking about? One example is using, the framework provided by Mental Health First Aid. So this is, again, a course we deliver, but we leave individuals with understanding that they operate within a framework, they have their boundaries, they have their limits, okay? So this is the action plan that's presented to them. I'm sure some of you would have, I guess, come across this training. I guess the thing about the way we deliver it is we deliver it in a very culturally safe manner, and we won't shy away from conversations, specifically related to the Muslim community. So how did just to end the conversation, how did the Prophet ﷺ deal with those in distress? This is like, there's so much, we look at these frameworks, like the one I just presented before, but as Muslims, we can seek so much inspiration from the Prophet ﷺ, this idea of listening and communicating non-judgmentally. And this is a hadith narrated in the Shama'il of Tirmidhi, where a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ. Just envisage this, please. Close your eyes right now. Close your eyes. And imagine that you're walking through the streets of Medina and you see a woman approach the Prophet ﷺ, and she said to him, I need something from you. So he said, the Prophet ﷺ response says, choose whichever road you wish in Medina and I will sit with you. And in another narration about this same hadith, it was narrated that this woman was suffering from a mental illness, mental or emotional distress. Subhanallah. And look at the way the Prophet ﷺ, he responded to her. The first lesson is the sunnah is to listen and be in tune with the people around you. Just like the Prophet ﷺ was in tune with the people around him. The leader himself takes the time to talk with someone who is struggling. He didn't claim he was busy, and he took the time to meet her needs, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he didn't advise her of, give her all this, advice from the Quran and the Sunnah, etc., in that moment. He was responding purely to the distress of the woman, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second lesson we learned, mental health, mental illness wasn't something that was stigmatized. Muslims have been at the forefront of mental health advancements. The Sunnah is what sparks the change for full holistic well-being. And I might give a plug here, this is something I'm passionate about. The experts in the field, mashallah, Stanford University Muslim Mental Health Lab, Dr. Rania Awad is doing some fantastic work in this space. And she's a sheikha, and she's someone I'd highly encourage you follow. Yaqeen Institute, again, I have no affiliations with these organizations, but they've got some awesome resources, I guess reconciling, this idea of mental health, mental illness with an Islamic perspective, Islamic paradigm. And I guess the third lesson we can learn from this incident is the way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he honored women, how he provided the space for them, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And something, again, these are community conversations we hear and we read about, and sometimes, you question where these beliefs, in providing or neglecting the woman of the ummah stemmed from, let alone the children. We know the children of Medina, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the children of Medina would take the Prophet ﷺ around, and they'd lead the Prophet. He'd let them lead him wherever they wanted to go, ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ would give the first harvest of like dates and fruits to children. He would honor the children, ﷺ. And then there's a whole whole bunch of different scenarios and stories that we can seek so much inspiration from. But I guess I purposely wanted to end the conversation by reflecting on the inspiration we can seek from the Prophet Muhammad SAW in these times of distress. Whether we're going through distress ourselves or the people around us, seeking inspiration from him sallallahu alaihi wasallam is so paramount. And there's another story I was going to share, but I don't have enough time. Abu Bakr's commitment to those around him. And I guess the big question, just to wrap up, is what are you planning on taking from today's session? I think that's a big thing. I'm happy to forward resources on for anyone that wants, inshallah, like articles and lectures that have helped me. But I think it's important that we don't just listen down. We're not sitting down idly by, but we want to intend to create some positive actions, and we want this to result in supporting each other when it comes to our overall well-being, inshallah. The importance of self-care. This is another thing, I guess. It's not just about laying an egg. So this is an analogy: the farmer that had a goose who laid a golden egg. It's quoted in Stephen Covey's book. One day he slaughtered the duck or the goose because he wanted to find the whole stash of eggs, but he didn't. And yeah, it was dead. So I guess, why is that relevant? The importance of looking after the goose. We are the goose. We have our energy and time that we give to the people and to things around us. But to lay that egg, to give that energy, we also need to be looking after ourselves, after our own well-being. Our own self-care. This word self-care has been coming up a lot, but it's important that we take time out, to recharge, as we move along in our life, inshallah. So with that said, these are the list of services you can access. There's Hayat line as well, a Muslim helpline. But yeah, feel free to reach out if anything, is distressing or you're going through a difficult time. And yeah, if there's anything, inshallah, that you want, you have any questions, feel free to reach out, preferably by email. About anything, inshallah, we can kind of, go from there. But I thank Jazakallah khair to UNSWMSA for extending the invitation and giving me a platform to share some of this. I pray, that we're able to action this and act on what we hear. We always end khutab and talks with making knowledge a source of change, a source of inspiration to allow us to change and act upon it. Because knowledge without action, is deficient. So yeah, I hope this was something that serves to assist everyone, inshallah, during these times. And yeah, I'll take questions. I think if we have enough time. I'm not sure if Sister Nafisa is here. Feel free to jump in as well if conversations tend to be more in the clinical domain. All right, so questions. Hey brother, you've pretty much touched on the false conception between poor mental health and low iman. I guess the way we reconcile the two, I always give that example. I had a sheikh once reach out to me, speaking about how his early childhood experiences and the trauma and abuse that he copped have made it difficult for him, despite him memorizing the Quran and teaching the sciences, to kind of, move forward with his life. The way he gives lectures, interacts with people, his own relationships with his wife and his children has been heavily impacted. And the first thing he picked up the phone and said to me, he said, I'm finished, or I'm destroyed because of those early childhood experiences. So when we talk about iman and mental health, iman is a protective factor when it comes to our mental health. It helps us cope with those situations, and vice versa. Our mental health, safeguards can safeguard our iman as well. I guess, not seeing them as too, I guess, independent, but also not one and the same. That's the thing. Just very quickly, I'll answer that question. What are real life accessible places Muslim youth can get free, culturally sensitive, professional mental health help? That's a very good question. I work for Headspace schools, not for a Headspace center. Youth mental health, more or less, the services that are out there for youth are broken. That's more or less like society-wide. So many young people, unfortunately, are falling through the cracks. Headspace included. Headspace doesn't have the best of reputations, unfortunately, but it is doing some fantastic work in serving the needs of young people. So in terms of culturally sensitive professional mental health help, I guess it's, going through mainstream services can be one, especially Headspace centers situated within LGAs with high CALD communities. Also seeking, help from professional Muslim therapists or counselors. Some Muslims, I know for myself, and I'm happy to share this, when I went and sought professional help from a psychologist, I sought one from a non-Muslim that was far out of the area. So it depends on the person. Going to a GP as a starting point is definitely the way forward. Getting your mental health plan and accessing the free sessions. How do I stay motivated and disciplined with my day-to-day activities such as studying and prayer? That's a very good question. I guess motivation is one of those things. Motivation is one of the things that fluctuate. So I guess knowing what your triggers are in terms of, what decreases your motivation, but also giving yourself the space to acknowledge that you're not a robot. You might have those downtimes where you just need to recharge. I know that was something I struggled with personally growing up, is too many expectations of myself, where you just reach a point of burnout and having to kind of start from beneath the surface, not just the surface, but beneath the surface because of how hard I'd crash. So I guess being kind to yourself, exercising self-compassion, especially in lockdown, would be my best tip. Also refer to Educate's latest post on 10 ways to look after your mental health. Shameless plug, during lockdown. So I think there was a direct message that was sent to me. GPs, I've heard, won't refer you unless you are suicidal. That is not, you're talking about general referrals. No, not that I know of. So if someone, when we talk about talk therapies, so you can go to the service yourself, straight to Headspace. You can access one of those helplines online. But when we're talking about seeking help, generally GPs will screen you before giving you a mental health care plan. And you don't necessarily need to be suicidal to get referred. And I know that my GP had very terrible bedside manner. When I told him I wanted a mental health care plan, he looked at me and he said, "You're not depressed, are you?" I said, "Mate, just I'm not going to open up to you. Just give me my mental health care plan." And I made the appointment via phone to the psychologist that I saw. But yeah, choose your GP carefully as well, inshallah. Does getting a spouse, life partner solve mental health issues? Oh, that's far out. These are good questions. Definitely not. I think, having a supportive partner can help you resolve underlying issues that you feel like you need to work on. But that as a solution, definitely not. I know, again, not making this too personal, but actually, no, not personal at all, actually. When looking at things such as attachment theory and early childhood experiences and the way they shape us as we grow up, a lot of the stuff that those adverse experiences especially can come out in a relationship. The way you respond to another person's distress, your own traumas growing up that were unresolved. A lot of these come up when you get married or get with someone, or even becoming a parent. So I guess knowing, getting married is fine, but I guess being open to the idea that if things do arise, that there's going to be different challenges that are presented to you that you need to work through. And I'm happy for Sister Nafisa to answer that if she is with us.
So I am here, Jazakallah khair.
Cool.
So I just wanted to put in there that I think the understanding, unfortunately, that a lot of us are given is that having a spouse, partner, someone supportive will somehow help us. The reality is, in terms of your mental health, the only person who has any power or control to change you is you and Allah. That's it. There's no one else who actually has, they can influence you, they can suggest to you, they can try and nudge you in the right direction, but ultimately you're in full control in terms of the choices, decisions, things you do.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Nafisa. Happy life, happy wife. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a Sheikh Bilal Danoon.
Isn't it the other way around? Happy wife, happy life?
Happy life, happy wife. That's true, actually. It goes both ways, doesn't it? I've got a few more questions that have been direct messaged to me, so I'll read them out. Sister Nafisa, are you okay with that, or did you want to present your segment? I feel like the Q&A is a spicy way of, I guess, getting people's energy levels back up, but it's up to you.
I'm okay for you to continue. Keep going.
Okay, especially at, oh, sorry, no. What if someone denies their emotions or they are apathetic? How do you approach them?
So I will touch on emotions in my talk, and I would recommend approach your own emotions first before approaching someone else's. And I'll explain a bit more what I mean by that in my talk, but I'll let you talk as well.
Deep. That's like it's a good segue. Like it's a pure, like the suspense around Sister Nafisa's talk. So stay tuned, guys. Anonymous question: how do we incorporate Islamic advice when trying to be present for someone with mental health struggles, in particular when they are pretty resistant to their deen? Yeah, Sister Nafisa, feel free to jump in here. But I guess, you know, using our reference point to what I just mentioned before around the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, and I guess aligning that with, you know, some of the approaches that have been established through evidence-based programs that do help in assisting, I think is something that you could possibly do, inshallah. Khair, inshallah. I'll end it there and I'll pass it over to Sister Nafisa. I have a uni assignment due at 12 a.m. and I was really keen to listen on your session, Sister Nafisa, but I do have to log out. I do apologize. I'm going to follow up Brother Farhan for a recording though, if that's all right. But Jazakallah khair. Please keep us all collectively in each other's prayer. And I pray, inshallah, that, you know, we're able to get through this period safely and that we're able to kind of use this conversation tonight to impart positive change across the community, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Brother Ziyad, for that wonderful talk. I love the mental health continuum you made. Personally, I never knew there was even a difference between mental health and mental illness, and your explanation of it was profound. Also, the gravity of the mental health issues within the youth, as you mentioned with the statistics, is insane. The fact that the Muslim community is not in any way immune from them is a reminder of how important it truly is to have this conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm definitely incorporating this knowledge into my life, and I'm sure others will too. Now we'll take a short 5-minute break, and feel free to grab some Zoom snacks, everyone.
Actually, with that break, I think we've gone a bit over time, so we'll actually skip the break if that's okay. Is that all right with everyone?
Excuse me, I actually really need a break.
Okay. All right. Well, then in that case, I'll give you guys a 3-minute break.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries. I will resume at 8:20, inshallah. All right, while you guys are taking a break, if you're a UNSW student, could you guys please fill out the ARC form? Yep, it's in the chat as well, and the link is on the screen as well. Also with the questions that weren't answered, we'll inshallah get to it after Sister Nafisa's talk. I think we'll get started now, inshallah, with the second talk, if that's okay with everyone. All right, I'll take that as a yes. So for the second talk, we have, so I'd like to introduce our final talk for tonight, Sister Nafisa. Sister Nafisa has been a psychologist for a decade. That's 10 solid years of expertise, mashallah. She has also worked extensively with the youth in the Sydney Muslim community. Tonight, she'll be presenting the topic, Finding Contentment in Hardship. I'll pass it over to Sister Nafisa, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Sarah. Thank you for saying a decade. It makes me sound old, but I'm not old at heart, just by years. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So I was actually really glad that I listened in for, and I've forgotten his name already. Brother Ziyad, was it? I believe his talk. And I guess in a sense, it's actually a really good segue, but because I'm going to try and sort of use the platform of knowledge base that he's given to try and talk through my part of it. So let me just share my screen so I can get that up and running. There we go. Oh.
It is 470.
Okay. Oh, why won't it let me? Sorry, technologically challenged here, which is more telling of my age than anything, I reckon. Anyway, so I just wanted to give you a bit of an outline about what I'm going to talk about, and also just probably before that. So yes, I have been a psychologist for about 10 years. So at the moment, I'm working as a clinical psychologist over at Macquarie Uni, looking after students, much like yourself, most of the audience here. And I just wanted to mention, I put in the comments there that in terms of support options, every university in Australia has a student support service. Go check out yours if you need it. They're there for everything from stress to depression, and they will either look after you themselves or send you to the right places. So I think it was Amira's question about where's a good place for youth to get service. If you're a person who's at university enrolled as a student, go to your university wellbeing or support, student support service, and check to see what services they do have. I do believe UNSW, actually I'm 100% sure UNSW has a student wellbeing unit. I'm an alumni of Sydney Uni, so I know Sydney Uni has one as well. And obviously I work at Macquarie. Really good options for you guys to go and check it out. If you're worried about culturally appropriate services, check with the uni to see if they have anyone from diverse backgrounds. If they don't, then again, going back out into the community with your GPs. In terms of what I'm going to be talking about today, Obviously, finding contentment in hardship, what underneath that particular title, contentment is an emotion. And it'll be a shame if we miss out on really fully embracing and experiencing those emotions. We all experience it, but we may miss it because we don't recognize it amongst what Brother Ziyad said, the storm that we're currently in, especially now being bogged down in the kind of the global context of the pandemic, and more locally what's happening with lockdowns, but also the recent protests. We might miss the moments of contentment that we do have if we don't learn to recognize it. So one of the first things I'll be talking about is how to deal with difficult emotions in a way where it doesn't overpower all the not really difficult, but really enjoyable emotions that we do have. The other things I want to talk about also are embracing hardships in a way that incorporates how you live your life, right? And what hardships can mean to us. And then I know I say Q&A, but we'll see. Hopefully I don't go up until 10 p.m. because then none of us will have any time for Q&A. Okay. Firstly, in order to recognize something like contentment, we actually need to learn to recognize emotions overall. I know, there's a lot of labeling of positive emotion, negative emotion, and those words are really weighted, and good emotions and bad emotion, that's a bad emotion to have, whether you're labeling it to other people or just internally talking about your emotions to yourself. Somebody's betrayed your trust, you feel really hurt, really betrayed by this person, that one you might label as a bad emotion. And okay, let me just distract myself or cut this person off so I don't have to experience this emotion again. So just want to put this out there as a first port of call, is that the label of good or bad, positive or negative emotion isn't helpful. And in fact, it's not true. Emotions are just sources of information. I would like to introduce to you the idea or the concept of your emotions as another source of information, much like tastes, your taste buds. They're not really bad or good. They just are. They allow you to sense whether something's bitter or salty or sweet or spicy. In that sense, emotions just are. They exist. They were given to us. We didn't choose them. In terms of, we didn't choose to have emotions, we just have them. So what we do is choose how to respond to them. Unfortunately, in the kind of Western, modern, contemporary context and society that we live in, there's a lot of messages out there trying to push us towards always or only feeling those positive emotions, trying to always head towards happiness or head towards feeling some kind of joy. And whilst there's nothing wrong with that, that as a goal is going to land you in pitfall after pitfall after pitfall, because you're not going to be prepared to experience hardships. Now, that is a societal kind of message that we unfortunately do internalize. We almost don't have a choice. It's just the world that we live in. But alhamdulillah, one of the blessings of being a Muslim is that we have a framework that is entirely different, that's given to us. And that framework, Brother Ziyad also talked about a little bit, but hardship is embedded in our very understanding of life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you're going to be given tests and trials. There is going to be hardship. So you go into the world knowing you're going to face some tests and trials, which is really, really healthy, really, really good, because there's no way to avoid them. But it also really helps us to feel like, oh yeah, well, this is part of me being human. I don't have to question why all this hardship, why are there tests? That comes as part of my religious understanding. Okay. What society does, on the other hand, is tell us, oh, get this new phone, and believe you me, I'm susceptible to this message all the time. There's so many ads, there's so many products, there's so many new innovative ideas, whether it's fashion, technology, social media. There are all these messages out there saying, hey, there's this new thing, this really cool thing, or this old thing changed a little bit, that's now so much cooler. So go have a look at it, go immerse yourself in it, you'll feel better. And then it stops being so fun or so new or so novel, and you stop feeling better. So again, that's the kind of messaging we're given, is always just to aim for that positive emotion. Unfortunately, this is the I'm going to talk about why this is not a healthy way of living your life. More just, I guess, thinking about on a kind of on a much more categorical kind of basis, the two ways that we experience emotions. At least when I talk to people about emotions, I always like to get them to tap into, okay, whether it's a top-down emotion or a bottom-up one. What I mean by that is, if it's a top-down emotion, say you read your email and it says you failed a subject at uni. That is a top-down emotion. You know, you read that, your thought is, OSH. What is it? Sugar, honey, iced tea? Sugar, honey, iced tea? You know, this is not good for me. Like, you know, you kind of have that. And then in terms of your physical experience, you kind of have the thought, this is not good for me, all of those sorts of things. And the physical experience from that is that you feel your stomach dropping or clenching. You feel like you can't breathe. Suddenly there's a horrible upset feeling in your stomach. So I guess that's the top-down kind of way we experience emotions. The bottom-up one is often one that people experience in a way where they talk about, for example, oh my God, I've just got this headache and it won't go away. I've taken Panadol and it won't go away. I've tried to just close my eyes and rest and it won't go away. It's not a migraine, it's this kind of pulsating headache. When people come to me with that and say, I don't know where, but this headache just seems to come to me, I tap straight into anxiety. What have you been worrying about, right? What's the thing that's been festering in your mind that you haven't been able to let go of? That's the kind of thing where it's a bottom-up emotion. There's a worry, but it starts from your body. And slowly, if you pay attention to that, and if you've got some experience at paying attention to what's this headache? Oh, it's a tension headache, right? Tension headaches means I've been worrying about one thing or lots of things quite a bit. So that's a bottom-up way of how we experience emotions as well, that it starts from your body and then it goes into your cognitive awareness. What recent research, and by recent I mean over the past 30 years or so, what we've found in terms of the work that I do in psychology and helping people with their mental health is it's not about just your emotions, just your thoughts. It's actually a combination of your emotions with your thoughts and with your body, the sensations in your body. If you tap into all three and learn how to manage all of those, then you're in a much better position to actually recognize and take control of what's happening for you. So you're recognizing your emotion, whether that's contentment or anger or anything else, by tapping into what the feelings are, how you label them. Do you call it sadness? Do you call it anger? Do you call it rage? Do you call it fear? Do you call it anxiety? Do you call it worry? What is it? What's the emotion that you label? And then what's the cognition behind it? Oh, I've failed. I'm actually really afraid because now I have to tell my parents. And, you know, I may not be able to continue with this, with my degree, or it has massive consequences for what I want to do with my future. Or maybe, you know, I've lost a pet or I've lost a family member. And so what are the thoughts? Wow, this hasn't sunk in. I can't believe I've lost them. This was surely a preventable death. All of these sorts of things are the cognitive parts of you. And then the physical sensations will be dependent on what you're thinking and what you're feeling. My apologies. I apparently have a cold I didn't know about. It's not COVID. Okay. So I want to go back to the point I made about emotions as being sources of information. I want to start getting you guys to think about what's the information that my emotions can give me? What possible information can it give? If you have any ideas, feel free to share. I do not know how to pull up my chat screen. Here we go. Oh, go back. Wow, talk about being technologically challenged. Anyone have any ideas about what information your emotions might be able to give you? Feel free to put it up on the chat. No? Maybe? How you feel? Yeah. warnings, yeah. Our thoughts in the moment. About danger, yeah. Your current emotional state, yeah. How to make decisions, yeah. Okay. Great. Really good responses, because I mean, you guys are on the right track. So they give you information about, you know, exactly what's happening in our environment. Is there some threat or danger that we need to be aware of, that we need to pay attention to? For example, if there's an immediate dread because you happen to have unthinkingly, you're on your phone, you happen to have walked in front of a car that isn't stopping or braking, fear is a very appropriate response, and you need to get the hell off the road. It's also an information source about what is or isn't working in this context. Something isn't working if you're feeling really horribly. Is it you and your internal process that isn't working, or is it something external, some environmental issue or some other person issue? But also it actually orients us to what's meaningful and important to me in this moment, that it brings up such an heightened emotion, such an intense emotion. And this is, I'm talking about specifically in those moments where you do feel rage. I'll give you an example. Whenever there's an injustice, such as, you know, if this hasn't really happened to me yet, alhamdulillah, but if it does happen to me as a practitioner, that, you know, a client of mine or a student does end their life by suicide, to me, part of my response will definitely be anger and rage, because it's preventable. Something could have been done, someone could have heard them, I could have done something. But if I just let that rage and anger kind of, if I just push it aside and don't pay attention to it, I'll miss how important this experience is to me, and I wouldn't have processed it, and I would have held on to it, and it will come back to bite me somewhere down the track. So as Aisha Duncan pointed out, it is a signal to an underlying issue potentially, that there are things that we haven't addressed for a very long time or for a short time that are coming up again, and we're feeling re-triggered because this current scenario reminds us of another scenario where we didn't respond, or where our emotional response was quite heightened and quite elevated. Your emotions are also a fantastic source of information about what's a good workable solution. So I guess in this regard, I always encourage people to tune in to their emotions, make sure they're learning and recognizing. And again, to give you a few more examples, anger might tell us we're stuck in a particular situation we don't like. I really don't want to be here. Someone or something is keeping me here, and I get, you know, irritated. Irritated is like low level anger, or I just switch from being okay to being completely enraged, and I seem to flip. But something in there I don't like. Anger might actually point a way out. If we keep reacting in a particular spot with anger, or to a particular person with anger, we may need to think about, well, is there a potential for not interacting with this person or being in this space? Because until and unless I sort out this response, I'm going to be sabotaging myself by engaging in behavior that's not okay. And again, it actually does tell us anger is really healthy when it means, for example, someone is being insulting or offensive, and it gives us that power and ability to be able to respond. And I don't mean, you know, shouting and yelling and screaming, but I mean being assertive and telling someone, hey, that's not okay. You don't get to talk about this person or these group of people in that way. Anger gives us the power to feel that way. If all we felt was sadness and anxiety when someone, say, insulted our religion, we wouldn't talk, right? We'd just go back home and probably lick our wounds, as they say. But in those moments, if somebody's insulting our religion, our God, our Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, we need to feel a certain amount of anger to be able to say, hey, no, that's not cool. You don't get to say that. Okay. Like I talked about fear. Fear is a really useful emotion. It tells us something threatening is happening. Usually it tells us something threatening is happening. And for example, if we're out on the road, like I mentioned, we're about to get hit by a car or some moving vehicle, we need to get out there. Fear is an appropriate emotion. We pay attention to it so quickly that it's not a conscious thought, it's just an action. If we're feeling sorrowful, it might actually tell us that, you know, there was a really powerful, genuine connection we had with someone, and we lost this person died, and it lets us know that that was a really meaningful connection. So it gives you information about how to understand yourself in the world and how to navigate your world. Now, in terms of using emotions to help us to see what's going on in our lives and to respond appropriately, we need to allow the space for these emotions. We can't go through life always aiming for, hey, let's just feel really good. Let's just go and do this thing that's going to make us feel so much better. We actually need to allow time for this pain, the sadness. We need to give it time, but we don't just give it forever. I don't mean 2 weeks or 2 hours of you just giving yourself time to, you know, feel complete despair. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about luxuriating in a useless emotion. I'm talking about giving emotions enough space and time so you recognize what's happening, understand yourself, give yourself the ability to then make sense of what's happening to you and do something about it. Tuning into and sitting with difficult emotions, in general, if you're in that, you know, going back to the spectrum of the mental illness versus mental health, mental wellness, if you're not in that complete, which way was his slide? I can't remember. Anyway, if you're not in that complete illness, the severe end of that category, you're okay to do most of this dealing with the difficult emotion with, you know, by yourself, with the help of friends and family. You'll be okay to do that. It's when you're more in that severe range, when you've gone a couple of weeks and you just cannot deal with these difficult emotions and they get in the way of you being able to study, to talk to friends and family, to get up and even, you know, feel like you want to have a shower. Those are the moments where you know, okay, this is too hard for me to deal with on my own. Other than that, I would really encourage you to take a moment to actually journal, to write it out. The power of writing things down is that they're not just, you know, kind of knots in your head. You start to get crystal clear on what are the issues and the things and the words and the language that you're using, this narrative that you're using in your own mind. Sometimes it'll be really self-critical, really hard on yourself, and sometimes you won't have the right perspective. Sometimes you will. Exercise. The reason I put exercise in there, and you know, subhanAllah, I don't know about you guys, but I don't do it enough for sure. But you need to be really familiar with your body in order to recognize when it's having an emotional experience. If you don't know the difference between when your body's relaxed versus when your body's tense and stressed, how are you going to know what emotion it's experiencing? If you don't know the difference between when you're doing this for 2-3 hours, you know, you're just wrinkling your brows and you're holding on to tension and you're clenching your jaws because something is really stressful and making you really angry and you're going around the, you know, just in that way. If you're doing that for hours and you don't even know it because you just don't have body awareness, man, that's going to have a lot of impact. You're going to develop migraines if you don't have them already. If you're walking around as if you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, you're walking around like this everywhere on campus, everywhere in public transport, you're just avoiding people's eyes, you're just wanting to look down, you're over it, you're over life, you're over everything, you've got the weight of everything on your shoulders, you are going to have back problems. And your mood is literally going to take a nosedive. So exercise so that you learn how to tune into your body. And so you can tell the difference between me being comfortable, relaxed, confident, okay, versus I'm depressed, I'm low, I don't see the point of even looking up and interacting with people or smiling at anyone, versus I'm really angry and I'm just holding on to myself and I'm just holding myself so stiff and tense. All of these ways that you carry yourself, believe me, other people will notice it. It's not as exaggerated or dramatized as I'm making it, obviously, but I'm doing this to make a point. It's really minute. People around you will pick up on it and they'll respond to you in that way. They won't pick up on it and tell you, hey, why are you clenching your jaw so much? They won't do it that way. That's the psychologist in me talking. I'll ask, what's going on? You're clenching your jaw. People will say, are you okay? Or people will stay a few more steps back away from you because they know that's a sign of anger instinctively. Their brains picked up on that and people's brains on an unconscious level are very, very well aware, this is a sign of someone who's really angry, or someone who's really depressed, or someone who's really sad. And they'll tune into that, not by saying, hey, your shoulders have been drooped for the past half hour. Are you doing okay? Did something happen? They'll say, you all right? What's going on? Something's different. Are you okay? That's the way they'll approach it. But just be aware, body aware. And so exercise is going to be really important. The type of exercise that like I personally prefer is yoga, but you don't have to do that. You can go out and do cardio, you can do weights, you can do anything that helps you breathe differently, use your muscles differently. Go do some running, cycling, anything, swimming, all of this, nothing is off the board here. Go play team sports, solo sports, anything. Just get your body moving in a way where you start to recognize what's tension, what's not. Okay, the other thing I talked about is mindfulness. It's a concept that's thrown around. It's not as easy as it sounds. You don't just get to sit there and, you know, think of nothing. It's not a meditation kind of exercise where you try and have a blank mind. It's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is basically having an aware of the present moment in some one aspect where you anchor yourself with one thing, and you do it in a very non-judgmental way. It's attention training. It's also allowing you to, like I talked about, to release some of those knots in your brain. So other ways of sitting with difficult emotions are talking to trusted people. Really important to pick the people you talk to. There are some people who have the best of intentions, but do you a lot of harm by make you feel worse about yourself after you've had a conversation with them. Those are not the people you want to go to. It's the type of people who you feel like they're going to be okay to listen. They're not necessarily going to jump straight into solving all my problems or giving me advice and solutions. They're the people who are going to take that first 3 to 5 minutes to just listen to what I have to say. Obviously, talking to Allah, and whether it's dua or salah or just you having crazy conversations, or in fact, any which way you want, that's a really, really good approach, and one that Muslims have access to quite easily. So, alhamdulillah. There's lots of other ways to tune into difficult emotions. I won't talk about them because we're way over time, but also there are ways that are specifically appropriate for people who are in that severe end of the mental illness spectrum. Have a chat to a mental health professional. They'll help you to identify those specific tools and techniques that are relevant for you. Okay, I'm going to move on to, I guess, before I move on, there's a possible question. Okay. So there was a question about, okay, so this is from someone, I'm assuming you don't want to be identified, so I won't identify you, but so someone asks, I become kind of sadistic when mental health issues become pretty bad. Can this be tuned out as well? I'm not sure you want to tune out the mental health issues or how you feel. And I'm not sure I understand the question entirely. So I guess, okay, my general response would be, you do need to tune into that. And the reason that you would need to, okay, so I'll read the question again and answer a little bit more clearly. So I kind of become sadistic when my mental issues become pretty bad. Can this be tuned out as well? So let me answer it in my way, and I don't know if that's going to be a response relevant to you, but I would say that firstly, if you're becoming sadistic towards yourself, I talked about the internal voice, the narrative that you have. You have a really critical voice. You didn't just develop it overnight. It's probably developed over years and years and years. Think about where it came from. Who's told you that you're a terrible human being aside from yourself? You probably tell yourself that. But what are you also becoming sadistic about? Yourself, the rest of the world, other people specifically. And as a result of that, I guess, what's the emotional content there? What does the emotion of sorrow tell you? That there's an important connection. Either there's a connection to yourself, to Allah, to other people that is missing, or that's soured and has ruptured and needs repair. So I wouldn't be tuning anything out. I also wouldn't be indulging in it. So I wouldn't be spending days and days in that emotional state. I would, however, practice figuring out and understanding, where is this leading me to? What's the, like I talked about, this emotion, the emotion that you experience in those moments is a source of information. What's the information? What's the emotion? So I'm gonna actually move to the next slide, because it does talk a little bit about, I can't move the slides. Wow. My apologies. There we go. Okay. So the next slide, I've put up 2 links, and one is what I call an emotion sensation wheel. You're welcome to buy it if you want it, or you can just use this picture. If you want to buy it, it's in that it's in that first link, Lindsay Brahman. The reason that I really like this emotion sensation wheel is, and I use it all the time, is because it gives you some basic emotions, and then it takes you towards, let's be a little bit more sophisticated, nuanced about how we label these emotions and how we understand them. So fear isn't just fear. There's scared, anxious, insecure, inferior, unwanted, embarrassed. And it's a bit of a wheel in terms of where the fear comes from. If it's social anxiety, social kind of fear, that embarrassed kind of emotion will come through. You might be blushing, all of these things. What are the physiological things, the body sensations that you notice, which is in that outer wheel, in the furthest wheel out there. Now, these body sensations, the amazing thing is, once you learn to recognize the emotional content for yourself, or the label for yourself, you'll know that for you, inferior doesn't mean frozen. Inferior actually means a tightened gut, right? Your gut clenches. Or scared doesn't just mean numb hands, but numb hands and feet, right? And what you're going to know is happy. And if we go into peaceful, peaceful doesn't just mean still for me, but it means muscles being really relaxed. So you're going to be able to add in your own physical responses into this cycle. And that I really like, because it means this is a wheel that you can personalize, and you can also recognize it for yourself. Okay. So I really encourage all of you and all of us. I mean, I'm already doing this. I've been doing this for years. If I didn't, I wouldn't be at my job. But when we allow these emotions, our emotions, whether they're really intense or we're okay, whether they're those really kind of positive emotions of happiness and excitement, or whether they're the really yucky ones that we don't want, of fear and sadness, they do give us information. And when we allow these emotions to give us their message, they don't sneak up on us and seem to take us by surprise, and they don't seem to come from our unconscious, and they don't sabotage our lives. So that's part 1 of recognizing contentment. There's no way you're going to recognize contentment fully and appreciate contentment fully unless you're recognizing all of your emotions, or unless you're learning how to recognize emotions fully in terms of your cognition and your body. Now, the next part of it was about contentment in hardship. Now, hardship I talked about is already part of the Muslim framework. We know it's going to be there. But how do we manage the hardship as an individual, not just, within Islam? Islam gives us principles about how to manage hardship. It talks about principle. It talks about patience. It talks about dua. It talks about turning to Allah. It talks about, looking back at the life of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and engaging with that and relating to that. So yes, okay, on a very broad level as Muslims, we have Islam. But on a personal level, each and every single one of you here today has a different approach to patience, has a different approach to dealing with hardships. And that's been learned over time, through experience, through your family of origin. Okay. What I want to point out is that knowing yourself and the core things that you value about yourself and the rest of the world will give you an indication about how you do in terms of hardship. Now, I've put up what's called the bullseye, but this bullseye is not like one you hit with the bow and arrow. It's one you're going to be looking at in terms of your personal values. As you can see up here, it says, I'm living fully in line with my values. Now, this is right at the core, right at the bullseye. Versus all the way far away, I'm living very far away from my values. I will come back to this bullseye. I just wanted to put it here for symmetry's sake. I had one circle. I needed another one. But I'll come back to this. Oh gosh, I Go to the next slide again. Where I got this slide, there's a PDF that's available at this link, the second link. Feel free to access it, but I would encourage you to go on that website first before accessing all those links, and read a little bit more about acceptance commitment therapy. So I'm going to get us to watch through a 3-minute video. I think it's 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. And it's by Dr. Russ Harris. Some of you may be familiar with it. If you've ever talked to me before, I may quite possibly have already talked to you about values versus goals, but I really like this. It's a simple explanation. I couldn't do a better explanation than this. It was available on YouTube. It's short and sweet, so please pay attention. Hopefully it works.
Society tells us the way to be happy is to achieve our goals. Get that great job, earn that money, get a good body, find a partner, have happy, healthy kids, have a big house, have a nice car, have holidays. Goal, 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 goal. And it's true that if you do actually manage to achieve these goals, then there is a little moment of joy and happiness. But how long does it last? How long before you're looking at the next goal, and then the next goal, and then the next goal? And as we live our life trying to constantly strive to achieve these goals, one after the other, how tiring and exhausting does it get? Is this you? There is a radically different way to live your life, which is a life based on values, a values-focused life. It's like two kids in the back of a car, and it's a 3-hour car journey to Disneyland. And the first kid is totally goal-focused. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? How much longer? Are we there yet? This journey of frustration, it's all about the goal. The second kid is values-focused. He's got the same goal. He wants to get to Disneyland, but he's also in touch with his values around curiosity, adventure, having fun. So he's looking out of the window, playing I Spy with My Little Eye. He's counting all the, the interesting farmhouses that he sees on the way. He's spotting interesting farm animals, cows and sheep. He's noticing different types of trucks and cars on the freeway. So he's actually appreciating the journey as he heads towards his goal. Now, they both reach Disneyland at the same time. They both have a fantastic time at Disneyland because they both got to achieve the goal. But the first kid had a journey of frustration. The second kid had a fulfilling, rewarding journey. Then on the way home, the first kid, are we home yet? Are we home yet? Are we home yet? All about the goal, all that frustration. Second kid's looking out of the window, noticing how the world looks different at night, spotting the lights in the farmhouses and the cat's eyes on the freeway. The car breaks down on the way to Disneyland. Now, both kids are really disappointed because neither of them achieved their goal. But the second kid at least had a fulfilling journey up until that point. Now, when the pickup truck arrives to tow them home, the first kid, oh, it's not fair. I want to go to Disneyland. How long before the car gets repaired? It's not fair. It's not fair. The second kid starts to notice how the world looks different when you're sitting in the front of a pickup truck high above the level of the rest of the traffic. So this is the very important distinction between the values-focused life and the goal-focused life. In the values-focused life, we have the fulfillment and satisfaction of living our values every step of the way towards our goals, the satisfaction of achieving our goals, and the fulfillment that comes of living our values even when we don't achieve our goals.
Okay. And now I'm officially stuck with not knowing how to get this back. Wow. Give me 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing and start sharing again. Sorry, everyone. As usual, I have technical issues that I don't know how to manage. Okay, so that video was basically my way of giving you guys a little bit of a very, very short introduction to the idea and to get you guys to buy into the understanding that if you live in just for goals, like I want to finish my degree, that's my next goal, you are inevitably gonna, I mean, you might be happy as soon as you achieve your degree, and I'm sure all of you have the capacity to do that. But what you're missing out on is a lot in between, is a lot that you're potentially going to learn in terms of the journey. So to give you an example, Brother Ziyad, he talked about, his university life, but he didn't really mention, oh, this was my degree, this and this. He didn't really talk about that. He talked about his experience in the Muslim Student Association, the MSA, and that's because it wasn't just about his being goal-oriented in terms of where he is in life. Maybe he wouldn't have labeled it as such, but definitely he was value-oriented. And the reason I can say so with a lot of confidence is because of the way that he was talking about his university experience, just for example. I want you guys to start to think about, okay, I need to practice reorienting my life so it's value-based, not just goal-based. There is nothing wrong with goals. You can have as many goals as you want. You can have the goal to be a millionaire or a billionaire, to go to, is it Silicon Valley or some other place these days that is the hub of the millionaires? But anyway, you can have those goals. There's nothing wrong with that. But just bear in mind, again, going back to this circle, by having those goals, are you living fully by your values? Are you going to be content? Are you going to be able to find that contentment? Or are you living so far away from your values that even if you reach that $1 million, there is no contentment for you? Now, this begs the question, how am I going to know my values? How many of you here, and don't show me your hands because I know there'll be maybe 3 people, but how many of you here have actually sat down and done an exercise to actually concretely understand, hey, these are the values I have. I don't mean universal values of being a good person, of being kind, of being, I don't know, compassionate towards others, just basic values like that. I don't mean those. I mean really personal values. I mean the ones that make you feel like, hey, this is how I want to live my life. This is what I want to aim for. This is who I want to be. So what really matters to you? What are the issues? What are the things that really matter to you? And the things that matter to me are not going to be the same things that matter to you. So you need to know about that. You need to recognize, what do you want to do with your time on this planet? All of it is okay. I mean, as long as it's obviously within the bounds of Islam. But if you want to be a full-time mum, go for gold. That is a fantastic value. If you want to be someone who really shifts and changes the way that people in Australia talk about Muslims, go for gold. Maintain that value. If you want to be someone like I talked about who has an amazing business and it's a really profitable business, go for gold. Honestly, go for gold. Like, none of that is bad. But you just need to know what you value, what sort of person you want to become, what matters to you, what qualities and characteristics do you want to develop in yourself. And to that end, I guess just to put it back in context of learning to live with hardships, these values, as long as you know that you're someone who's acting in line with your values, your hardships will still be emotionally difficult, emotionally challenging, but they won't make you feel bad about yourself. They won't make you think I'm a terrible person, or I didn't do the right thing here, or feel really guilty about the actions that you've taken in that hardship. Hardship is something we all have to go through. There is no escaping that. We know that. And I talked about that. We've got that embedded in our religious framework, which is fantastic. But what do you tell yourself when you go through hardship? Are you okay with the things you do, the way you talk to people, the way you behave when you do go through hardship? Or are you not okay with that? If you're not okay with it, it tells you a lot about what you value and that you're living very far away from those values. I want to bring, oh no, don't play this again. Okay. I want to bring a couple of, look, normally I'm not a massive acronym person, but I really like these ones. I want to take you from fear to dare. Now, this is an acceptance commitment approach, and the link that a couple of slides back that I had is the link that will help you understand more about the fear to dare kind of approach. Fear, it basically stands for fusion, excessive goals, avoidance of discomfort, and remoteness from your values. And dare is actually resolving those kind of approaches to life, which is diffusion, acceptance of discomfort, realistic goals, and embracing your values. So let's just talk in a little bit more detail about that. And to answer your questions, Zara, I reckon I'll need maybe about 5 to 10 more minutes, inshallah. So I want to talk a little bit about fusion. The idea of fusion is, if you can see my hands, they're fused together, right? They're very, very, very close. Now, fusion is about the story that you tell yourself and how closely linked you are. If your thoughts and the narrative that you have of yourself are like this close to your face, you cannot see anything beyond it. I literally can't see the screen because I'm holding my hand up here. If your thoughts, a particular thought or a negative thought or a realistic thought is this close, you're never going to be able to see anything beyond it or have any other perspective. But if you can diffuse, which is move that thought away or that experience or that narrative away a little bit, move a little bit distant from that, and it's a practice, it's a visualization exercise. If you want to learn about it, go hit up your closest therapist, or just go to the website that I've sent you, or look up fusion versus diffusion, or look up acceptance commitment therapy. Any of those will do. But essentially, it's learning how to distance yourself from thoughts and stories and images that may not be important, that you tell yourself is the most important thing, but it may not actually be all that important. It feels like the most important thing because it's so scary, it's so depressing, it's so makes you so angry, but it may not be that important. You will never get the chance to make that judgment call of whether it is important or not unless you distance yourself from it a little bit. So there's a lot of ways to defuse. Fusion looks or sounds like, I guess, in your brain, things like, I'll fail, this is too hard, I'll just do this later, I'm too weak to do this, I don't have enough skills, or I'm not talented, I'm not good enough, I can't do this. So this is what fusion looks like. Diffusion looks like, oh, I did fail this unit. Wow. Let me take a moment before I jump straight into blaming myself and, calling myself a terrible human being. Oh, I did fail this unit, probably because I didn't actually study for the past 3 weeks. Probably because for the past 3 weeks, I've been worried about my family in India who've been, dying with COVID. Probably because, and do you see the difference between fused with I've failed, I'm terrible, I've let my family down, I've failed, my family are paying for my degree here, and I've failed, this is terrible, rather than that, I failed, that's right here, and you can't see anything beyond it. You're probably going to have a panic attack or fall into a deep state of depression if you keep going down that train of thought, if you're that fused. If you just give yourself a little bit of distance and say, I failed, it's terrible, but for the past 3 weeks, I have been going through hell and back, right? And you can give yourself space to see, okay, fear, sadness, but also I am not that fused with it. There's more to this. There's more to the story. I can make sense of this. The excessive goals, oh my goodness, we all do this. Anyone who's at university, anyone who's from an ethnic background is somehow we have high achievement embedded into our DNA or something. We're all high achievers. There is nothing wrong with being a high achiever, but it does become really unhelpful when you're very, very excessive in terms of your goals. Think about it. Did you lack the time to reach your goal? Did you, was your goal to finish a 5-year degree in 3 years? Not going to happen. That's not realistic. Did you have issues with your health, or were the people really close to you having serious health issues? Was the project just too big and you wanted to achieve it just because you thought you could, but you bit off more than you could chew? Avoidance. Now, avoidance is massive, 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 massive. Every single one of us avoids something or the other. Look, not all avoidance is bad. Again, all of this that I'm talking about is not absolutes. There's gray areas to everything, but in general, are you avoiding discomfort? If you avoid getting that yucky sensation, oh, someone's going to judge me badly, or something bad might happen, or I might get a bad grade. If you're avoiding those feelings, and therefore you're not doing a particular unit, you're not talking to a particular person, you're not taking on a particular challenge, you will never develop as a human being. So acceptance taps into that. Acceptance taps into, I need to accept that sometimes I will be really uncomfortable. Sometimes I will be actually feeling pretty bad because someone's giving me critical feedback that's correct. And then the other one, actually, I forgot to talk about setting realistic goals. I guess you guys understand that. Just set realistic goals. Have a think about it. Who's in your life? What's in your life? What are your skills? What do you need to upskill? What's the reality of what you can achieve versus what do you tell yourself? Okay. Remoteness from your values. And I showed you guys the bullseye, the circles. If you're really, really, really far away from your values, you will know. You've forgotten your values. And if you never even knew them, how are you to forget them? But so take some time to figure out what you value. And again, the exercises are at that second link that I sent you, or haven't sent it to you, that are on the slide. I'll send you guys the slides. So you've either forgotten or you've lost touch with your underlying values in it, aiming for a particular goal or in taking a certain path in your life. And if that's the case, you're going to need to find a way to embrace your values again. Okay. I think that's where I wanted to end for today. I want to reiterate, I'm not a massive fan of acronyms, but I really like this one because, you know, fear and dare are two polar opposite kind of behaviors. If you behave in a way where you're afraid, you tend to avoid things, and all of these things happen, I talked about. But if you dare to be live in line with your values, to challenge yourself a little bit, to do better with yourself, then you're going to be able to, inshallah, despite difficulties, despite hardships, despite feeling the yucky feelings that we may not want, you will, at the end of it, progress as a human being, grow as a human being, and learn more about yourself, inshallah. So I just wanted to end with Allah's reassurance, and and also my reassurance to everyone here. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. So that is where I want to end off. I know there are a few questions, so I'll stop sharing the screen. I don't know how to. Okay. I will stop sharing the screen and I'll do a couple of things. I will just upload my slide to all of you as a PDF. So you're welcome to have access to it. I don't really mind. Just bear with me. I did not do this earlier. Probably should have.
If anyone of you have any questions, you can send it on the chat now.
I know I've got a couple of questions on the chat already, so
okay.
I'll try and go back to it. I have a question, but I don't think it's related to the topic. But when someone has had some sort of long-lasting depression from a young age, maybe from the age of 9 until today, is it possible that they might have some sort of mental disorder? Yes, it's entirely possible. Depression isn't something that, it's not like a chronic illness. It's not like a blood disorder. If you have it once, you always have it. Depression comes and goes. It comes and goes. What I mean by that is, again, going back to that spectrum, you could be okay for a lot of periods of time, and then something happens, boom, your depression hits and you're falling right back into that clinical severe state of depression. Severe states of depression you will recognize by the entire change in your whole being. Not only do you think differently, you feel differently, your body is different. Physically, people find it a lot harder to move. They just can't move as quickly or as much. It's hard to get out of bed. It's hard to go have a shower. It's hard to make yourself meals. You don't have an appetite, much of an appetite, because, well, what's the point of eating? But also your body starts to shut down and says, yeah, we don't really need to eat. What do we need energy for? Or you could have depression especially with young kids, for 9 years old, around that age. Children can be really irritable, in the sense that for no reason they go from being okay, they're playing, to super angry and super irritated. Children can be really unpredictable in their behaviors. Their appetite can be off, in that they just eat whenever, eat a little bit, or eat nothing at all. As an adult, your appetite can go the other way, that you're just comfort eating all the time. You're craving all of those really unhealthy, high sugar, high carb kind of foods, because, again, your body's struggling to cope. So clinical depression versus, I'm sad, and I don't really enjoy much in life, but sometimes I'm okay. I have these happy moments. Sometimes I don't, versus depression. Barely any happy moments in my life. I don't enjoy anything. I don't like anyone. I don't even like myself. Okay. So I wouldn't say that that's a normal thing. I would really strongly recommend, in the first instance, go talk to your GPs. And again, like Brother Ziyad mentioned, ask for a mental health care plan. Mental health care plans are basically the government's way of reimbursing the costs of mental health care for you. So, excuse me, the cost of seeing a psychologist can be covered in part or in whole by Medicare. That's the use of a mental health care plan. Okay. If you keep using diffusion, won't it be hard to sometimes take responsibility for your own laziness? No, diffusion is not meant to be used to give yourself excuses. Diffusion is not a technique you use to kind of distance yourself from your responsibilities. It's one that allows you to recognize that you are being lazy and take some action and make some changes. I hope that answered your questions. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. Oh, sorry, I happen to have sent it to one person only. My apologies. I'll send that file to everyone again.
Were there any more questions?
There's just one more question.
Okay, easy.
What are some techniques we can use if our values and who we are do not align with the values prescribed by Islam? Is change futile when you're already an adult? So I would look at, there are very few values that I can think of that are outside the boundaries of Islam. So check the second link that I've sent. It's a PDF document, and I think on page 20 something, it talks about recognizing, identifying your own values. And now there's a list of like 50 something values on that page. There's, the 50 something values, I don't remember reading anything that would be a value outside the boundaries of Islam. So I'm not sure how to answer that question, to be perfectly honest. I've never come across a value personally that I would say with 100% certainty it's not a value prescribed by Islam. Okay, so even something like wealth and ambition, those are definitely prescribed by Islam. I don't know if you're talking about, actually I can't even imagine what you might be speaking of, but maybe I've lived too sheltered a life. If you can give me an example, that would be maybe helpful. Okay, what kind of Islamic values should we have to help? Islam gives us tons and tons and tons of values. You pick and choose whichever ones you like, but some of those things are the values of, say, for example, compassion. We talked about that. The values of ambition. We talked about that. Doing the best given what you've got. The value of modesty or moderation. We've got those in place. So feel free to pick and choose. So when I talk about values, just the definition that I've used, I put in an earlier slide. I'll go on to the next question. If we have a family member or close friend that has clinically diagnosed depression and is regularly seeing psychiatrists and taking medication, what's the best way we can be there for them and maintain our own mental health when caring for someone? It's a really, really good question. I just want to point out that medication is really good, but it's one type of therapy. Medication does not change the thoughts you have. It changes the neurobiological kind of aspect of it. It changes your brain chemicals. It basically changes the way, depending on the medication, changes the way that neurotransmitters are sent from one neuron to another. And so you have more access to the happy feelings, I guess. So you have more access to dopamine and you have more access to serotonin or norepinephrine, depending on the medication. So if they're seeing psychiatrists and taking medication, that's one aspect. The other aspect to look after is, what are their relationships like? What's their connection to their immediate family, their community, their friend circle? desperate need for connection when people are depressed, because depression makes you feel like you just need to isolate. You're not worthy as a human being. Who would want to talk to you? You're too depressing anyway. Nobody actually, or you just hate other people. So you need a good core of support. Now, in saying that, as a carer for someone who has depression, it can be immensely draining. Self-care is more important. I use a leaky bucket scenario whenever I talk to carers, and a leaky bucket scenario is that each and every single one of us has, if we think of our internal energy sources buckets, all of our buckets have holes. When we care for someone with depression, there's a ginormous hole in the bottom, because someone is always siphoning away our internal emotional kind of levels, our empathy. And they need a lot of it. They have a huge need for empathy and for compassion, but we as individuals only have certain capacity. Our capacity could be this much or this much or this much, right? It's up to us to recognize what are our limits, and then to have ways to either get rid of those leaks in our buckets or refill it, keep filling it faster with more. What do I mean by that? Either figure out what are the other problematic areas in my life that I can potentially manage, or figure out what are the coping tools and strategies and support mechanisms for myself that I can add. And that can be a really tricky question to answer, but it's a good one to start to think about. What are the moments that I have for myself? If I take a moment away from myself, am I just feeling guilty that someone, a member of my family who has, clinical depression, is going to hurt themselves, right? And if that's the case, then can I get other people on board? Have I been trying to do everything on my own? Are there others who can help, but I've been saying no because I'm worried about the stigma? Okay, so someone sent a question before. I may have missed it. I'll just answer this one. Are depressive disorders always caused by a life event? No, not always. Or could it develop for no specific reason as a person ages? So we may not be able to identify the specific reason, and the person who's experiencing that depression may not be able to identify it, but the reasons exist. The reasons are actually really complicated. We call it the biopsychosocial model, which is basically, yes, there are life events. Yes, there's potentially a genetic heritage component, but also in terms of your DNA or biological component, there's something called epidemiology, which is about when your DNA, specific bits of your DNA get switched on or off depending on what happens in your circumstance, which is the social aspect of things. Okay, let me go back to finding the question I missed. Sorry, I missed your question. Must have been quite a bit back. Can't seem to find it anymore. Here we go. When I confront serious issues, I become robotic, for example, only focusing on the facts of a situation. I'm not sure why I respond this way, but sometimes the rationality helps, but it also means I hold back from things like showing any sympathy or empathy. What can you do if you can't recognize your emotions? Really good question. So I really, really love this question because it taps right into your fight, flight, freeze mechanism. If you don't know what that is, please look it up. But essentially, whenever you sense that something is wrong or dangerous, or you're not prepared to face something, your body, your mind, brain, body, all of that goes into fight, flight, freeze mode. What that means is you pick one of three options. You pick the option of fighting back, which is you get really aggressive, you start yelling at people, you start physically becoming aggressive, you push people away, you throw things around, you start yelling, you start swearing, etc. That's fight back. Flight is when you run away, you hide, you literally just avoid. If someone starts to raise something, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to talk about this now. Let's talk about this later. If someone tries to raise an issue with you that you feel is really confronting for you, you typically, okay, I've got a message, I've got to respond to this, I've got to go. Hey, I forgot to do my laundry. I've really got to do that now. Or I left something on the stove. I've got to go check if it's still on. You use any excuse, all excuses you can to avoid that discussion, that conversation, that scary thing, that confronting thing. The other one is freeze. This one is less talked about and less recognized because it looks like exactly that. You suddenly become robotic. A part of you literally freezes. Which part of you? The emotional part of you freezes because it is too overwhelming. over the years, these types of conversations, these types of things have become too overwhelming for you. And basically your system starts to shut down. This is beyond your window of tolerance. You can't actually respond to it. So the way to do that, the way to actually respond appropriately and not just in terms of rational and logic, is to give yourself time to self-soothe. And different ways to self-soothe, whether it's a cup of tea, whether it's yoga, whether it's going to give someone a hug, whether it's actually finding time to breathe differently, to let your body relax, to let your muscles not tense so much. Remember, freeze is literally that your body turns into ice. It becomes robotic. So I really like that you use that word robotic, because that gave me a clue into typically what happens. I guarantee if you practice that robotic moment in front of a mirror, if somebody has happened to capture you, I don't recommend videotaping yourself or asking other people to videotape you. That's not what I'm asking. But I guarantee that if you could see yourself, you'd recognize you'd become suddenly, not only just in terms of your words and your thinking, but your face would be robotic. Your shoulders would be tense. You'd be holding yourself differently. So change it from your body. Start to do the things I talked about, which is recognize what parts of you is responding physically, and then redirect to what's the emotion. If it's not fear, is it sadness, right? Recognize what it is. Once you recognize it, then breathe through it and slowly titrate your way back into that conversation in a way that's comfortable for you. But you need a little bit of discomfort, not so much that you're frozen, but a little bit of discomfort, and use it as like a step ladder plan. Bit more discomfort, bit more discomfort. I guarantee you it could take you years or months, but it's really, really worth it to be confident in addressing those conversations, not just with facts, but also with emotions. Okay, I think I've got a couple more questions, and then we do need to wrap up. It's quite late. How do you help someone with depression without ruining your mental health at the same time? It's really tough. I talked a little bit about it. Self-care is really important. Recognize your warning signs for when I'm going too far down into depression, and prioritize your care. You can't do anything for anyone if you're depressed, if you've got no empathy, if you've got no energy for yourself. So it's really important to look after yourself. How could we reconcile psychologically and Islamically things like fear of death or judgment day? Okay. That's a question I don't unfortunately have time for tonight. It's 9:25. Really, really, really good question. Death anxiety is actually massive. We can reconcile it, and I wish I did have time to answer it. Okay, for something like ADHD, does medication need to be involved? Yes and no. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. If you don't want to opt for medication, can your condition be improved till you don't have ADHD anymore? I think your understanding of ADHD is incorrect. ADHD is not like a cold or flu. It comes and goes. It's an impact on your immune system. It talks about brain function. Your brain just functions differently to everyone else's. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just the way that your brain wires, the way that your brain thinks, the way that your brain responds to stimuli is different to most other people. It's called neuroatypical versus neurotypical. So what that means is, if you don't want to opt in for medication, be prepared to live quite differently in terms of being, putting in changes to your environment. Do not expect that your brain will have capacity to pay attention to something for half an hour, 2 hours. It's not going to happen. After about 15-20 minutes, your brain would have taken flight and gone, hey, this is too boring, or hey, something else came up in front of me. And that's just the way your brain operates. The way that the school system's set up these days, it'll be really difficult for that person to be able to function, because those environmental changes are really challenging for most institutions to put into place. But that's a decision that you can definitely make. You don't have to opt in for medication. Although in saying that, most GPs and psychiatrists will tell you you need medication, will prescribe it for you. If you opt out, be prepared to be a lot more kinesthetic. What I mean by that is move a lot more. While you're studying, walk around and study. Put something over your ears so that you're blocking out sounds if that's something really distracting to you. Understand that you're either going to need a space where there's lots of people and therefore the background noise helps you stay focused, or there's nobody. And your desk is clean of everything except what you need. So there's lots of ways to go about it. You just need to understand that ADHD isn't something that just goes away. It talks about how your brain works, how it operates. You can't go in there and give yourself a new brain. I think my sister has ADHD, but she doesn't want to get diagnosed. That's her prerogative. She doesn't have to get a diagnosis. If she does get a diagnosis, what's it going to mean for her? Her behaviors are not going to change. Her life is not going to change unless she, you know, she goes to a university or she's in primary school or high school, and her school needs to know so they can make some changes for her studies. For example, just understanding that she's going to need things on paper and for questions to be broken down. She may really struggle to be able to write an essay because to her, she didn't even know where to start or what the question is asking for. So those sorts of things. I'm trying to get through these really quickly. When making life decisions, in terms of changing careers or in terms of relationships, how do we know if we're acting in line with our values or just stressed and exhausted and are running away? Make those decisions when you're not stressed, exhausted, and running away. Make those decisions or have a think about your decisions when you're actually feeling quite calm and quite centered and quite rational. But also understand what your values are. Write your values down. I've sent you that link. Please go into that, understand your values. I already know my 3 to 6 core values, and I will know them for life. And I know that I haven't lived my life differently from the time when I've been able to make choices to now. The moments when I've lived outside of my values, I also remember those because I was either a bully or I betrayed friends, or, you know, I made choices that I would not have made. And those memories stick with me because I was not living in line with my values. Okay. Oh, yay. Jazakallah Sheikh Junaid for sending the article about fear of death and fear of Akhirah or Yawm al-Qiyamah, whichever it might be. That article sounds really useful. Like I know that topic is a little bit beyond the scope of a Q&A, so I wouldn't have been able to do it justice, and I am sorry I didn't answer it, but there you go. Answers are everywhere if you look. Can you speak about how to spot someone with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder? I can't speak about it here. If you want to have, actually, I don't know if I know who sent me the question, so if you want to talk to me later on, please do. I haven't seen therapy help my parents. Is there any point for me to go? This is a question for a friend. I haven't seen therapy help my parents. Look, therapy isn't a band-aid. It isn't a solution to everyone's problems. It doesn't have to be therapy. Sometimes therapy isn't helpful because it's not addressing the actual problem. If your problem are finances, that you're not happy with where you are, or you can't afford the type of life that you're living, and that's really going to stress you out, therapy isn't going to help with that. If your dissatisfaction with life comes from what you're doing with your life in terms of, I really hate my job, I really hate my study, therapy isn't going to help you with that. That's other things. So I don't know why therapy isn't helping your parents, but I do know that if you want to go, if you feel like I probably should go, I've tried everything else, it hasn't worked, I just want to try this out, just go give it a go. You're not going to potentially lose anything except time and money, which might be a lot. But give it a go. Find a therapist who you have a good relationship with, somebody who you feel like, oh yeah, they're actually listening to me, and hey, they make sense of my life and some things, and they're really helping me to learn more about myself, and they seem to be in tune with me and my emotions. Then stick with that therapist. They usually help. So back to the sister with ADHD. She's at uni and struggling a lot. Wouldn't a diagnosis be good to let uni teachers know? 100% true. All universities, just as they have student wellbeing supports in terms of counselling and therapists, they also have supports in place with people who have diagnosed conditions. The supports they have in place, at least at Macquarie Uni, what we do is typically have embedded an individual education plan where students are given the opportunity to have extra time for assignments, for example, or for an exam, or for their lecture content to be presented in particular ways, or for, you know, someone to take notes for them because they've been distracted and they just lost the thread of the lecture, and so they can have access to those notes later on. So yes, it is helpful. However, just be careful that the diagnosis doesn't become, this is my identity, I'm someone with ADHD. That can be really toxic as well. Okay, I will finish up there. I think we'll close the questions. I don't want to go for any longer. Jazakallah khair for your time so much. I hope what I've said has been helpful. Go look at the 2 resources. I've uploaded the document here, my presentation here. Feel free to look through the slides if they're helpful. And yeah, once again, just let me ending off with, I will just make dua for everyone who's listened here. I don't know all of you, but I do wish you the absolute best in terms of your internal health, your mental health, but also your physical health. Stay safe. May Allah protect all of us and, allow us to thrive in this world and allow us to reach the highest state of Jannah in the Akhirah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Ameen. Thank you, Sister Nafisa. Jazakallah khair for your presentation tonight and staying way over time. May Allah reward you. One of the key things that I took from your presentation is that as humans, we'll experience many hardships and be overcome by many emotions. And I guess some of these we understand and some of it we don't. But the key thing is that we can learn to deal with these emotions, and we always have a lot to turn to. Jazakallah khair again, Sister Nafisa. We'll move on to the Kahoot, inshallah. Do you want to go? Oh, wait, actually,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, like we'll do the feedback form first. The feedback form is in the chat, will be sent on the chat, and it's on the link here. If you guys could just fill out the feedback form first. I know it's quite late. I'll give you guys like 3 minutes to do that, please. And then we'll move on to the Kahoot and things, inshallah.
Hello.
Yes.
My bedtime's at 9:45, so can you please do a bit more quickly?
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you very much. You're a very kind person.
You don't. You don't have to join the Kahoot if you don't want to.